Hello, Augies. I'm Dave Kassler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG. Today we'll have a look at MFJ's upgraded Cobweb antenna. Last May, I reviewed the 5-band 20 through 10 meter Cobweb. I liked it. I thought it looked a bit like a clothesline and operated well from only 10 feet in the air. It was a good stealth antenna. My only regret at the time was it didn't also cover 40 meters. Well, MFJ is now upgrading their line of Cobweb antennas. Here's what they have now. They have the original in both a low power and a high power version covering 10, 12, 15, 17, and 20 meters. They have a low power version and high power version that adds 6 meters to that mix. And then the big news. They have an 8-band high-power Cobweb that covers 6, 10, 12, 15, 17, 20, 30, and 40 meters. And then, for those who have the original Cobweb, there is an expansion kit. The MFJ 1835 HK34 30 and 40 meter add-on kit for the MFJ 1835. MFJ sent me the kit with the big long name on it for review. The upgrade kit sells for $119.95 US. Since I already have a Cobweb and reviewed it quite favorably in Ask Dave 71 in June of 2017, this video looks at the upgrade, which does not include a 6-meter upgrade, but everything else. Here's what's in the kit. The long ones are the pole extensions. There's a support mast with the hardware to connect it to the top of the existing Cobweb, plus some rope. It includes the 2 new elements. They're not labeled as 30 and 40, but rather with the actual length. And you can figure that the longer one is the 40-meter element. The kit also includes the support rope and the 2 insulators, one for each new antenna element. There is ample hardware in a plastic bag, and this is what's left over here. This photo shows the original Cobweb set atop a 10-foot wooden mast. It performed well, even with its low height. The original Cobweb manual states it's designed to operate well at 10 feet in the air. Its low profile and good performance makes it a good semi-stealth antenna. The antenna with the upgrade is substantially larger. In this drawing, the original Cobweb is outlined in this loop here, the inner red loop. The new Cobweb is outlined by the outer loop. Notice how substantially larger it is. I opted to mount it on a nearly 20-foot mast. This shows the entire antenna. You can see the added parts. Each horizontal pole, or boom, is extended with a thinner yet still sturdy pole to hold the 30 and 40 meter wires. The most visible difference is the mast sticking up that holds the black cord that in turn holds up the horizontal booms at the 20 meter attachment point. Without this, the poles would sag too much. As it stands, the arms are fairly smooth and level. The 30 and 40 meter antenna elements meet at the Matchbox in exactly the same manner as those from all the other bands. I made a little mod to the Matchbox back in June. MFJ uses nylock bolts which require considerable torque to install. As you can see in this demo, the screwdriver has to be pushed quite firmly against the screw as the nylock bolt is tightened. I found that tightening a nylock bolt on the antenna feeder would cause the internal balun connection to come loose. So I eliminated one of the bolts so everything would tighten together nicely. However, to do this, you need to open the Matchbox to get at the other side. After I'd attached all the elements, I tightened everything and then closed up the box. To add the mod kit, you need to take the Cobweb down so you can work on it on the ground or maybe on a 4 or 5 foot mast. It's best to do this over a concrete slab or a deck with no holes because of the many small screws, nuts, and washers. Because of the size of this thing, doing it in a garage might be impossible. But no matter how you do it, the entire antenna needs to be where you can get at all of it. Here's a picture of how I originally put the Cobweb together, and here's how I mounted it so I could get at the whole thing by rotating it around. I had two height options here. One for tuning, got the antenna up and out of the way, and another one brought it down where I could work on it at eye level. For me, by far the hardest part was what I thought would be the easiest, and that was mounting the additional mast support for the ropes. There's a little bracket that you mount on top with some slightly longer screws than the originals. These are supplied with the kit, but I still managed to lose one. I originally had put in the screw and bolt upside down for convenience. It didn't matter for the original Cobweb, but it sure mattered now. The nylock bolts are not like ordinary bolts. They aren't easy to turn until they're tight. Rather, they're hard to turn all the way until they're tight. I would have preferred hex head screws or bolts or Allen-headed bolts because you can get a tool on it without having to press so hard as one does with a screwdriver. Once you have the mast extension on, you then add the boom extensions. To do this, remove the screw and bolt at the end of the existing boom and move the 20-meter wire element out of the way. Slide in the boom extension. You want the boom extension end that has the hole set back from the end. Put this in, line up the holes, and then put the screw in. The holes in the boom extensions are inexplicably smaller than the original boom holes, so you may have to use a screwdriver to get the screw back in by literally screwing it back in. Once you've got things nearly closed up, put the wire back around the screw under the washer and tighten it down. Do this on all 4 boom extensions. Then there's a little metal loop that you can slide over each boom extension, to which you can tie a rope. Now, MFJ wants you to put a screw, nut, and spacer on these, but I just routed the rope through the hole and tied it to get to the boom's level. Note, after temporarily attaching all the ropes to the boom extensions, you will have to do lots of adjustment back and forth to get the extension mast vertical. Once that's done, hook up the wires for the 2 new elements. When things are tight at the matchbox, then pull it back together, then take up much, but not all of the slack out of the 30 and 40 meter elements. If you do too much, it'll warp the thing in terms of the booms. They're plastic, they tend to move around, so you want just a little bit of slack in there. Now, once you get these 30 and 40 meter elements around to the back, they'll sag quite a bit. There's quite a bit of extra wire. Cut them in the middle and use the insulators just as you did when you put your original together. Now, regarding tuning, the new elements affect the tuning of the old elements. So check and adjust everything, check it again, adjust it again, and so on. I did some by guess and by golly on the 20 meter element that worked out okay. The manual says to hang the wires down and trim them. I did it more simply. I hung down the stub and then folded the wire back on itself. What you do at 10 feet in the air won't necessarily work at 20 feet in the air, and the tuning for the 40 meter band, in my case, simply went up in frequency until it was mostly out of the band. I note here that the high power version of this antenna has a coiled coax choke ballon in addition to the current ballon in the Matchbox. I decided to put new connectors on the coax because, as you can see here, the crimped connection had slipped out. So I installed solder type connectors. I have more confidence in this piece of coax than I had before. Getting the antenna in the air is difficult because the big thing is so incredibly unwieldy. Have someone help you. Don't try this alone. If you lay the antenna back far enough to insert the main mast, the antenna edge is on the ground and wanting to bend. My wife and I finally got it together and hoisted it into the air about 17 or 18 feet off the ground. Both the upgraded Cobweb and my old butternut HF9V with lots of radials will take high power. I have a 500 watt amp, so I routed the output of the amp to a new alpha delta coax switch. That way I could have the amp in the loop for both the HF9V or the new Cobweb. I could switch back and forth incredibly easily just with this little knob. Now, it's time for some CUSOs. I spoke with KG5HVO and AG7KO on 20 meters late afternoon. Although both the vertical and the Cobweb in theory have no gain over a dipole, in both cases the Cobweb had somewhat improved performance over the vertically, sometimes quite a bit. Then I went to 40 meters. That's where I discovered that the only part of the band in tune was at the very top. However, I spoke to W8JNK and KD8YVC on 7279 kilohertz, and again, the two antennas seemed about equal. I will tune the antenna to resonate further down the band, but sadly don't have time to do that before releasing this video, plus it's snowing outside. Okay, so what's the bottom line? If you have a Cobweb, you want to seriously consider adding the extension kit. If you take your time and have a helper, it can go up pretty easily. It's a good antenna for the price. It requires no radials. Try to mount it away from the house if you can. I had my original Cobweb on the roof and it picked up too much man-made noise. Note that except for 30 meters, the expanded Cobweb will not cover the entirety of any band, so pick the part you want. Picking the middle of the phone band is one approach. Personally, I think this antenna is a keeper. I intend to mount it in another part of the yard where it's much less visible from the road, but I may leave that chore until spring. Now, could I use an antenna tuner with it and cover the whole band? Undoubtedly. However, I don't have a high-power tuner, so I need to get the antenna as close to tune as possible before I run the amplifier to it. So, Augies out there, please click like and please subscribe and share. If you'd like to know how you can support my videos, go to www.dcasler.com/support. Until next week, 73. Next week, we'll dive into the new SDR Play RSP-1A, an amazing, completely software-defined radio general coverage receiver that's taking the receiver world by storm. We'll look at both the hardware and software ends of the system.